Welcome to Secure DataSnap Development's Code Rage session. My name is Pawel Glowacki. I'm working for Embarcadero as an EMEA technical lead for Delphi and Rad Studio. And today I'm going to discuss options for creating secure multi-tier applications with DataSnap framework, focusing on new features that were introduced in latest version of Delphi XE5, and specifically creating mobile secure clients with Android and iOS compilers that are now part of Delphi XE5. So I'm going first to discuss different options of DataSnap security. So really security in DataSnap can be achieved at different levels. So first of all, you can secure the actual transport, so the communication between client and server. So you can use secure protocols, you can use encryption filters, you can use also security at the level of the architecture. DataSnap features authentication and authorization for role-based security. Also, to achieve security, it's important how you deploy your DataSnap multi-tier system. So I'm going to, after discussing some of the theory behind DataSnap security, create step-by-step a secure simple DataSnap system with a DataSnap server deployed to the EC2 instance running in the Amazon Web Services cloud, and create different types of clients to it, including mobile clients. Okay, so first of all, there are three different types of DataSnap servers that you can create that differs in how they are structured. So you can create a DataSnap standalone server. So this could be a VCL forms application, console application, or service application. And in this situation, you can use TCP/IP communication protocol or HTTP or HTTPS. The other two wizards in DataSnap REST application and DataSnap Web Broker application create DataSnap servers that are hosted within a web server. So in this case, transport is limited to web transport, so HTTP or HTTPS. So then you can connect to these servers using different client architectures. So you can use either DBX connectivity, so using a T-SQL connection component, or using a REST model with a T-REST connection component. Also, you can use transport filters. So these are the pluggable filters that you can actually use to modify the actual byte stream that are sent between client and server. So for all different types of servers that you can create, it is possible to use HTTPS, which is an inherently secure protocol using a secure socket layer. So this is the first and very easy to achieve option in order to get your server, basic security for your server. So basically the communication between client and server is encrypted. The second level of security you can achieve using encryption filters. Delphi XE5 comes with two encryption filters, PC1 and RSA. They are typically used together, so you can basically add another level of security. So on a very basic level, we have a security achieved through HTTPS, but then on top of the transport, you can apply encryption filters. On the next level, on the level of the actual architecture of our application, where we can use authentication and authorization. If you select an authentication or authorization option in the wizard, you will get DS Authentication Manager added to your server, which makes it possible to authenticate users, and once the users are authenticated, they can be added to different roles. And then, depending on the role, we can authorize access to a certain functionality on the server. So we can differentiate users. So you can have a public user that has only read-only access, or maybe you have an admin user that has a full access to the underlying data in the application, both for reading and writing. Also, it's possible to actually add your own security measures on top of the authentication authorization framework. You could, for example, define and login and logout methods to additionally restrict and prevent unauthorized access. So this is also important how you deploy your application. So typically in a client-server architectures or multi-tier architectures, our servers are deployed to some remote locations. Especially it's important when you build mobile clients. You want to make sure that your server is securely deployed, so you need to make sure that your firewall is properly configured and there are different deployment policies observed. So I'm going to go straight into actually using Delphi XE5 to build a secure DataSnap server with very basic functionality. So I'm going to use all discussed security measures. I'm going to use HTTPS, encryption filters to have a secure communication. And then I'm going to also use role-based security just to demonstrate how you can use in your code these features of DataSnap. The resulting application I'm going to deploy to my EC2 instance running on Amazon Web Services Cloud, and then we are going to build clients for this DataSnap server and discuss what files need to be deployed along with our clients, because when using HTTPS you need to make sure that you have OpenSSL libraries also included in your clients to make it possible for communication. Okay, I'm going to actually switch to Delphi, and from inside of Delphi I'm going to create a brand new DataSnap server. So file new, other, and in the DataSnap category we have different servers. I'm going to go for this DataSnap standalone server, which is probably the most convenient for demonstration and deployment, and gives me all possibilities. So clicking on OK, the first option is how my server is going to be packaged. So it could be a VCL Forms application or console application or service application. So probably the most easy is the VCL Forms application. This is probably the most important tab here in the DataSnap server. So here by default we have a selected TCP/IP communication, but what I really need is to enable HTTPS communication. So I need to make sure that this HTTPS is selected. Even though I'm going to use HTTPS only as my communication protocol, if you look into the documentation for the DataSnap server wizard, you will find out that it is recommended that the TCP/IP option is always selected. So I'm going to keep this option selected as well, even though I will be primarily using HTTPS as my communication protocol. Then I'm going to also select authentication and authorization. So I want to make sure that we have a DS authentication manager added to our server application. I'm going to leave this sample methods and the server methods class selected, even though I'm going to change my sample methods. And here is very important, I'm going to enable encryption filters, also to make it even more difficult to inspect the traffic. I'm going to add a compression filter, which will basically additionally compress the raw byte of stream that are sent between client to server using a zlib algorithm. So here we can test ports if they are open. So test port succeeded, test port succeeded. And on the next screen, this screen is actually here to specify the SSL certificates that my server is going to use. So this screen is normally not shown if I would not select HTTPS, but because I have selected, I need to use it. So at this point, if we would be creating a productional server to deploy to the production, I would probably obtain a commercial certificate from some commercial certificate authorities like VeriSign or TOFT. But for development purposes, I can generate test certificates myself. So first of all, you want to make sure that you have an OpenSSL installed on your development in your development environment. So here is the OpenSSL for Windows download page. So at the end of this presentation, I will make sure that all those URLs that I'm using here are documented. There will be a references slide. So this from this location, we can download and install the OpenSSL for Windows. In my case, I have decided to actually deploy it to the C tools OpenSSL. So this is not a default. This is not a default directory, but it is convenient to have a directory which is relatively simple with no spaces, because there are plenty of command line tools that you may want to actually invoke from command line. The next step is, once you have this installed, you can use the OpenSSL command line tool to generate test certificates. So there is some gotchas here. So basically here in the this URL you can see the actually the second one, the command line to generate a test certificate. However, if you just after installation just follow this, you will get an error that the OpenSSL cannot find the OpenSSL configuration file. So this file is not installed by default, but you can actually create it on by your own. So there is also another URL here, how you can set up OpenSSL to create certificates, and in the point 4 we have contents of the custom config file for OpenSSL. So basically what I have done, I have created this config file just using editor, so it's there, and also to simplify the process of creating the these certificates, I have created a simple batch file that will basically generate a test keys for me in the output directory C keys. So here I have already done it as a preparation to this session, but I'm going to actually delete these two files from here in order to generate it from scratch. So I'm going to run this simple batch file. So basically inside of the certificate you have information about the identity of the web server, so things like the name of your company, so I can put it my company, and basically organizational unit, web, email address, info@mycompany.com. So it's not really important what you put here for test purposes, but if you would create a commercial certificate, this information should be exactly representing your organization. So I'm going to skip this state of province, I'm going to skip country name, I'm going to keep NL for Netherlands, and common name will be Pawel. So these are the information that will be embedded in the certificate. So once I have provided this, I can now see that there are two files generated inside of my keys directory. So this is where I'm going to point the wizard to. So back in Delphi, here I can actually go to certificate file name. So on my C drive in the keys directory, there is a public key. So this is in HTTPS we have two keys. There is one that is a public key. This is the one test with a PEM extension. The other one is actually a secret key that should not be shared. I have made sure that it has a different extension, the key extension. So now once these two are added, I can test if the wizard actually see if these certificates are working okay. So the test succeeded, so I'm quite happy with this. So I can go ahead. So here is I can select the base class from my server methods class. So if I would actually like to connect to the remote database, it's probably the most convenient to select DS server module. So it's probably the safest choice here. Okay, so my server is now created. Let's save the server and inspect what we have actually got here. I'm going to actually create a new directory, simple stocks, and that will be my directory for different projects. I'm going to also create a subdirectory server to make sure I have server and client projects separated. So the unit 11 is the server form unit 1. So I'm following the naming convention of the wizard. So the other ones are already have good names. So the server methods unit has server container unit, and my server will be called simple stocks server. Okay, so I'm going to also change the name here, simple stocks server. So the main form is not really relevant, so I can make it smaller, so it does not occupy too much space. Let's have a look what have been generated for us. So inside of the server container form, we have a number of components. So we have components that are typical for every DataSnap server, so DS server, DS server class. I'm not going to really go too much into their role because there are other CodeRage 8 sessions that discusses the architecture of a DataSnap. Here on a TCP server transport component, we can see there is a filters property. This is a collection of all filters that are enabled. So notice that I have selected all of both encryption filters and compression filters. So there are two encryption filters, RSA with some properties, and PC1 with the actual key. So this key is actually generated by the wizard, and it's actually it's a secret because it's compiled into the server application. But in many situations you may want to generate your own key here. But I'm going to stick with the default values. And there is also a zlib compression filter, so all filters are enabled. There is also the cert files component added. So this component represents certificates. So there are two properties, cert file and key file. So again, this is something that you might want to read from some kind of a configuration file, but you can also leave it embedded and compiled into your application. There is also an authentication manager component added. So this authentication manager has a very important events: on user authenticate and on user authorize. So this is a place where we need to programmatically basically authenticate the user. So first, the first step is the authentication. So we decide whether the user using its username, its password, but we can also inspect the protocol that is used to connect to the server, whether the user is valid or not. So this is our responsibility as programmers, to actually set the valid parameter that is passed by reference here to true if the user is authenticated and can connect to the server, or maybe false when we want to reject such a connection. Once the user is authenticated, that we know who he is, then we can actually add it to a certain roles. So there is another parameter here, user roles, that we can use to add the user into a certain role. So there is also an event on user authorize, where we can programmatically decide whether the user should be authorized to access a certain functionality of our server. So there is an parameter here, DS server method event object. So this is where we can actually programmatically decide whether the user is who the user is, and we can decide whether user should be authorized to call a certain method or not. So most of the time we won't be using this method, the onAuthorize event. So what I'm going to do is to actually going to remove completely this event, because if I keep it and with this code valid equals true, basically this would override all our authorization functionality within the server, and all users will be authorized to access all the functionality. So we want to actually limit who is able to access which functionality. So I'm going to delete this code, click on save, and the empty event handler should just go away. So now I have only on user authenticate functionality. So here we can, as programmers, we need to specify some code. So in reality, we would actually probably retrieve the user and password from some kind of a database or some persistent storage, but we can also programmatically mimic some functionality. So basically, let's decide that we will authenticate any user that does not have an empty string as a user. So if user is not empty, and the second thing is we want to enforce that the users are using HTTPS. So if the user is not empty and the protocol is HTTPS, then we basically say that the user is valid, and otherwise it is not valid. So we can basically specify else and valid to false. Okay, so then we can now also add user to roles. So let's define an admin role that will be granted access to all the functionality of the server, read and write. So let's define such a schema that if an user name equals admin, then we will basically add it to the user roles add, and we will basically add it to admins. Okay, so in this way we have defined the rules for authentication. So the user has to be non-empty and using HTTP protocol to connect in order to access the functionality of the server, and if the user is admin, then he is added to a special role, admins. So the functionality of the server is defined in the server methods unit. So these are the methods that has been generated by the wizard. I'm going to get rid of them and define my own rules. So in our simple stocks our simple stocks, we have function get stock price, so we can specify the stock symbol as a string, and we will get a value of the stock as a W, as a double, and the function set stock price, so this will be a symbol defined as a string, and a new price will be a double. We can also return boolean to tell the client if the set stock price operation was successful or not. So in this functionality, maybe we can just do a dummy implementation just to have something here. I'm going to get stock price will be basically result will be some random value multiplied by 20, and the set stock price will always return true if you will be able to call it. So I want to prevent users that are not admins from calling a set stock price. So this is a sensitive operation. So I want to only allow users that are in the admin's role to be able to call it. So here in the DSOut unit, if we inspect this unit, we can see there is a trollout custom attribute defined. We can use this custom attribute to decorate methods that we want to actually specify that are actually that are allowed to be able to call. So here there is a constructor that takes authorized roles, and also we can actually skip the denied roles. So in this way we can specify the authorized roles. So I'm going to add to this function actually custom trollout, and we can here specify admins as our the role that is allowed to call it. Also, it's possible to add this custom attribute here as on top of the whole server methods class. So in this way we don't have to individually decorate individual methods. We can basically specify that all methods has to have a certain authentication requirements. So in this way only admins should be able to call this method. So I can actually compile this application and create a client for it. So let me actually demonstrate how you would go with creating the client. So it's important that you can have two different types of clients. You can have a desktop client or a mobile application client. So I'm going to actually start, in order to test my application, my server, if it's actually working okay, creating a mobile client, desktop client as a FireMonkey HD application. I can click create on save. In my simple stocks, I can actually now create a subfolder client. And this is also important from the perspective of how you structure your code. Some of the code for accessing DataSnap server can be generated with the wizard and can be shared between the desktop version of your client and the mobile version of your client. So here I can actually define 3 different folders: desktop, another will be mobile, and another will be shared. So later I can actually see how this is not shared but shared. Okay, shared. So now I can very easily create my code. So here basically the first step is to first of all my server needs to be running. So I go to the my server. Actually now I have done it wrong, because I have created the new project and closed the server. So what I really want to do is to add it to the project group. So I'm going to do it again, add a new project and create a new FireMonkey desktop application, in this case HD FireMonkey application. Click on save, and in the simple stocks in the client, in the desktop version, I can save it as a form client unit 1. So project will be my simple stocks desktop client. Okay, so project group will be just simple stocks, and that will be my functionality. So the first and easiest way to create a client is to use a wizard, so file, new, other, and here in the DataSnap server category we have a DataSnap client module that I can use. So I can specify a remote server, but at the end I want to deploy it to the remote machine. DataSnap standalone server, click on next, specify HTTP, and inside of the HTTP specify that it's going to be HTTPS. The default protocol port was 8081 and 127.0.0.1. I can now test the connection to my server. So the server is not running, so the connection was refused. So I have to actually go back, make sure that server is running. It's running locally. I'm just using this for testing my client, and now I can again start my DataSnap client module to generate client code. So I'm specifying again 8081 HTTPS local, and click on test connection. So that should actually authentication manager rejected user credentials. This may be to do invalid combination of DS username and password. So that's something that we actually expected, because one of the rules here is that the user cannot be empty. So I can actually specify my admin. I know that this is the connection that is okay. So the test connection succeeded. I can click on finish, and the wizard should generate for me two files. One file with the client module unit. So this is something that is going to be shared. So I can select it in the client module unit, and again in the client shared client classes unit. So this is the functionality of my server. So this session is relatively short, so I will basically switch to a pre-built application that demonstrate already the same server and two clients. So I have a client that is a desktop client, so this is my client, and also I have created the mobile version of the client, basically using FireMonkey mobile application. So the source code is quite straightforward. On top of what have wizard generated for me, I have actually added the functionality to connect and disconnect. So I don't want to hard code the information about the host, username, password. I want to provide it programmatically. So this is how you do it. We have a SQL connection params property, allow you to specify all those different values, and then I have also code to disconnect. So I want to be able to disconnect and connect as a different user. So here I'm actually destroying the server methods client, so the proxy object, and closing the connection, so I can actually again connect as a different user. So here is my application. Also, so that's quite straightforward. So that's a desktop version of the application. I have already deployed my server to the cloud. So here we can see this is my EC2 instance. I have defined certain rules. So there are only certain ports open, my application is going to be on port 8081. I have an elastic IP address, so this is the IP address where my application is visible. I can also see my application running inside of the remote desktop connection. It's also important to open proper ports. So we have a Windows firewall with advanced security console on my remote machine, where I need to make sure that the HTTP ports are open. So here you can actually see the inbound rules. So this is the rule that I have defined, and that the traffic on this range of TCP IP ports is allowed. So in this way I can actually connect to my remote server. So I can actually minimize this. So this is where my server was deployed. Also, what is important, and we can see it here quite easily actually on my remote machine, that I need to deploy a certain libraries as well. So here inside of my simple stocks I have these two libraries deployed. So this is part of the OpenSSL. For this application to run, they have to have these two libraries deploy, libaea32 and libssl32. Also, I have on the same location as my development machine, here I have my keys. So this is where the keys for SSL has been deployed as well. So in this way we can really communicate with this machine. Okay, I'm going to first compile this application as a desktop application. So I'm going to a default layout, 32-bit Windows. I should be able to connect to my remote machine. So click on connect. So I'm connecting as admin. So now I see I'm connected. I can get the price and I can set the price. Price has been changed, and now I can disconnect from the server, change the admin to something else, admin, connect to the server with different username, and now I can get price, but if I click on set price, I should see the remote error that this user is not authorized to perform the requested application. So the same functionality can be also used on the mobile device. So I'm going to switch to Android. I have exactly the same source code here. So there are two tabs. On the first tab I can specify the connection settings, and there is also an action list with two change tab actions. So if this is successful, I can actually change the tab to a second tab, and on the second tab I have a functionality to get the price and set the price, and possibility to go back to the connection screen. So let me actually try to compile this application for Android. So I have here a special screen grabber. Actually now you can still see the view from my previous experiments from iPad. So now this Android should reconnect and give me a new screen. So it will take a moment. Let me actually see if I can set our screen active, or maybe I will just restart the viewer so I have up-to-date information. So first the application needs to be compiled and is going to be deployed to my Nexus Google Nexus 7 tablet tablet. So it's now compiling and deploying. It takes a moment, and hopefully everything will be working okay. So this is something that I do the first time it takes a little bit longer, the subsequent compilation should be faster. So now it's actually installing the APK file that was already deployed. So first was uninstalling, and now it's installing the resulting APK file on my connected tablet. So now I already see, but you don't see this. So I want to go and select I have this Android screen grabber, and that should show the screen of my connected device. First I need to actually go back, so I'm going back to the connect. I can click on connect, and now I'm in the get price, so I can get price and I can set price as well. So if I connect using different credentials, first I need to disconnect and connect. I should not be able to call set price. I get a remote error that this user is not authorized to perform the requested operation. So I can also deploy this application to iOS device or iOS simulator. However, this would require additional files to be deployed as well. So here I have there is a very interesting article by Olaf Monien that actually, this is a blog post that actually discusses which files needs to be deployed on different platforms. So we know that these two files DLLs needs to be deployed on Windows. I have it on my system path, so my Windows client is working. If I want to compile for Mac, these are the two dilibs that needs to be on the path. For iOS simulator, again, this should be the same dilibs, and for iOS device there should be two DLLs, but they are in the form of A files. So there also is interesting here to make sure that these A files, so these are the iOS dynamic libraries, that they are statically compiled into your client. You want to make sure that this unit is actually added somewhere in the project. So I have followed this structure. There are two if defs, one in the users clause and one that is needed to, if you are running on simulator, to tell the application where to find these dilibs. So I have the same code I have actually added to my project. If you look into the users clause, this is what you will see. So for the iOS simulator, you don't need to do anything except for those. This is probably the most important part. So you can actually now run this application in the simulator. So I should see in a second the simulator starting. So now I could actually connect and get price and set price. The same functionality. I can disconnect, connect as a different user, so maybe like this, and if I connect, I should not be able to set the price. So all the functionality on different platforms is the same. So also when you deploy to the iOS device, you would also want to create this also add these A files. So you can download these A files from this actually from this location. So this is indyfullgun.com/ssl. You can download this file. I have downloaded this file and actually put it into my Z drive. There is this actually Z drive open SSL static lib. So these two A files, libSSL-A and libcrypto-A, needs to be somewhere that Delphi during compilation can find it. So probably the most easy way is to actually put it to program files, Embarcadero, RAD Studio, and in the lib folder you can go into the iOS device and copy these A files to both debug and so this is libSSL and libcrypto, and here for the release the same thing. So you have libcrypto and libSSL. So in this way, during the compilation, Delphi will be able to find these two files. Okay, so in this presentation I have discussed different options for securing DataSnap servers and clients, especially in the context of the mobile applications. So we have been using HTTPS communication protocol with encryption filters, with role-based security, deployed this to the Amazon Web Services EC2 instance with special security policies, and created two client application, one mobile and one desktop, that were sharing the DataSnap access code, and I were able to actually compile it as a desktop application and also as an Android application. So summarizing, DataSnap is a very flexible framework for creating secure and highly available and multi-tier architectures. You can achieve security on different levels, so on the level of the transport, and also through the code that you can write to create your own custom security measures like login, logout, or just using a DS authentication manager component. So this is quite unique. You can create applications with DataSnap that are deployed to the cloud and access it from all kinds of mobile and desktop devices. So through a component-based approach, you can be very productive. So you basically build your servers and clients with reusable components very quickly, and you can be very productive. So here is the some links to the downloads that I have these URLs that I have been demonstrating. So you need to obtain and open SSL. You need to create your test certificates. I would also recommend having a look at the Daniele Tetti blog. So there are some custom DataSnap filters that you can use in your development. So this has been updated for the, I believe, XE4, but it's working in XE5 as well. So there are some also encryption filters that you can use. Probably the most powerful is Rheindahl encryption algorithm. So also, I would suggest looking into the Amazon Web Services documentation to see how you can easily deploy your servers, how you can provide security. Also, very important and very useful link from Olaf Monien that basically discusses which files needs to be deployed with your applications to have an SSL security on different platforms. Okay, thank you very much. I hope that you enjoyed this session, and now it's time for live Q&A. Thank you very much.